What happens when a CEO grabs a mop to clean the dining room and hears a worker quietly told to reuse unfinished bread rolls? Miles Carter leaned on the railing of his apartment balcony, sipping black coffee as the city stirred below. 8 years ago, he'd bought a struggling Southern-style restaurant chain with 8 locations. Back then, the food was solid, but the culture was rotten: low pay, high turnover, and no care for customers. Miles turned things around, invested in training, raised wages, and built a reputation around comfort and honesty. But lately, something felt off. Online reviews for the Pinehurst location had nosedived over the last 2 months. Dining room filthy, manager yelling at staff. Bread rolls tasted stale. The district manager, Jason, said it was just a bad stretch and a few lazy hires. But Miles didn't like second-hand answers. He hadn't met most of the restaurant staff in person. It was a corporate chain. Each location ran like its own world. He rarely visited stores unannounced, and when he did, it was usually with a full team wearing a suit. He wasn't recognized on the ground, and today that would work in his favor. He shaved his beard, dyed his hair a darker brown, and wore thick-rimmed glasses. His name tag read Mike, and his uniform matched the new hire outfit: plain black tee, apron, and a hairnet. He'd set up a fake training through the staffing agency the restaurant used when short-staffed. Jason thought Mike was a temp helping fill a cleaning gap. When he got to the Pinehurst location, it was a Friday morning. The dining room still smelled like last night's grease. Crumbs littered the booths. A sticky film coated the floor near the soda fountain. "Get on the dining area, Mike," called a gruff voice behind him. It was the store manager, Trent. Late 30s, red-faced, with a voice like gravel and a constant scowl. "Wipe down every booth. If I see fingerprints, you're doing it again." Miles nodded and grabbed a tub of sanitizer. He kept his head down, wiping one table after another. The lunch rush hadn't hit yet, but the kitchen already buzzed with activity. A young server, maybe 19, hustled between the back and the front, shoulders tight with stress. "Hey," she whispered as she passed him. "You're new, right? Don't let Trent catch you leaning. He'll dock your hours." Miles gave a quick nod. "Got it." By noon, the place was packed. Families ordered fried chicken, meatloaf, and the famous house rolls. Miles was on his knees under a booth, scrubbing something sticky off the wall when he heard it. "Don't toss that!" A sharp voice barked from the kitchen pass. He looked up. A teenage buzzboy had a tray of half-eaten bread rolls from a cleared table. "Manager said we're supposed to reuse the clean ones," said a woman in a faded apron, pointing at the tray. "Just pick out the untouched ones." "Don't be soft." The busboy hesitated, but they were on people's plates. She rolled her eyes. "Then wipe 'em off. You think anyone's gonna notice? Trent says we're wasting too much bread." Miles froze. He stood up straight, heart thudding. He walked to the kitchen doors and peered inside. The woman, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, was stacking untouched-looking rolls into a fresh serving basket. Trent stood behind her, arms crossed. "I don't want this getting back to corporate," Trent said quietly. "You got that?" Miles stepped back, gripping the edge of a table. He took a deep breath and returned to the dining room. He needed to stay calm. He wasn't done yet. At the end of the shift, he found the young server again in the break room. She sat on a crate, sipping a warm soda. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up. "Yeah, just tired." "Been on doubles for 4 days. "Why? We're short 2 servers. One quit, one walked after Trent screamed at her in front of customers. District hasn't sent any help." "You ever tell anyone?" She laughed, tired. "Who, Jason?" "He just tells us to hang in there." Miles nodded slowly, jaw clenched. He left without saying more. He drove home and sat in silence for a long time. He had seen enough. Tomorrow he'd go back. But not as Mike. Miles arrived at the Pinehurst location the next morning just after opening, this time in a slate blue button-down and jeans. No apron, no disguise. He walked in through the front doors without calling ahead, without notifying anyone. The hostess, barely older than a high school senior, froze when she saw him. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen. "Is Trent in?" Miles asked calmly, but with weight behind it. She nodded slowly and motioned toward the manager's office just past the prep station. He's doing schedule edits. Miles walked past the counter. The dining room was still empty, save for 2 booths of early risers with coffee mugs in hand. The place smelled faintly of bleach, but he noticed a trail of dried soda leading under one table. No one had mopped. He knocked once on the office door, then opened it. Trent looked up from the laptop. His face stiffened when he saw who it was. "Miles, wasn't expecting you this morning." "No," Miles said, stepping inside, "you weren't." He closed the door behind him. Trent stood, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "You don't usually come out here in person. Everything all right with?" Miles cut him off. "I was here yesterday, on shift, undercover." Trent's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. "I watched your team repackage bread rolls from used trays. I heard you tell a cook to keep quiet about it. I saw a server on her 4th double in a row because you're short-staffed and didn't escalate it, and I listened to you talk to people like they're replaceable." Trent crossed his arms. "Look, I don't know what you think you saw. I know exactly what I saw." Trent shifted his weight. "We're under pressure. Jason said to reduce waste. Those rolls are just sitting on untouched plates half the time. I mean, you're done." Miles's voice was flat. "Collect your things." Trent blinked. "I've been running this store for 4 years. You were supposed to be leading it, not cutting corners and driving people out. This isn't negotiable." Trent opened his mouth, but Miles had already opened the door. "Leave your keys at the desk." The silence that followed him out into the hallway was absolute. As Trent left through the back exit 15 minutes later, Miles stood in the dining room observing. The morning crew buzzed with nervous glances, whispering behind the soda machine and peeking out from the kitchen line. He walked behind the counter and called softly, "Can I get everyone out here, please?" It took a moment, but within a few minutes, the front of house and kitchen staff gathered by the register. The young server from the day before lingered near the back, arms folded across her apron. Miles looked at each of them. "I'm not here to make a speech. You've been working under a manager who didn't respect you or the customers. That ends today." No one spoke. He continued. "I saw how hard some of you worked yesterday. I saw people covering for each other, trying to do the right thing with no support, and I saw others following orders that never should have been given." One of the cooks, a stocky man in his 50s with burn marks on his arms, stepped forward. "Is he really gone?" Miles nodded. The man exhaled slowly, nodded once, and turned back toward the kitchen. Miles addressed the group again. "I need someone to step up in the interim. Who here knows the schedule system, supplier calls, and payroll hours?" The cook's voice came from behind him. "Nina does." The young server's eyes widened. "Wait, you've been holding this place together for a while," the cook said. "You just didn't have the title." Miles looked at her. "Is that something you'd take on temporarily? You wouldn't be alone. I'll be here for the next few days." "Hands on," she hesitated. "I'm not a manager. You are if you say yes." After a pause, she nodded. "All right, I'll try." Miles turned to the rest. "For now, we're closing early. I want this place deep cleaned from top to bottom. Nothing served today. Everyone still gets paid for the full shift. Anyone who stays late gets bonus hours." The dishwasher, a quiet man with deep lines under his eyes, raised his hand. "Do we toss the bread bins?" "Every single one," Miles said, "and we're switching suppliers, starting tonight." The team dispersed. Some looked relieved, others simply unsure. But the tension had shifted. By mid-morning, Miles was wearing gloves, helping scrub the walk-in cooler. Every shelf was wiped down, expired condiments tossed. Nina was in the office, going through the POS system with another server watching over her shoulder. Midday, Jason arrived. He walked in fast, phone in hand, confusion written across his face. "I just got a call that Trent was fired." "He was," Miles said, wiping his hands on a towel. "I made that call this morning." Jason blinked. "Shouldn't we have discussed?" "No." Jason took a half step back. "Okay." "What happened?" Miles dropped the towel. "Did you know he was telling staff to reuse food?" Jason's jaw clenched. I mean, he mentioned bread cost was high. You didn't ask why. You didn't visit. You didn't investigate when turnover tripled in 2 months. Jason didn't answer. Miles stepped closer. I'm not asking you to explain, I'm telling you to listen. You've been floating above this store while it sank, that's on you. Jason looked toward the kitchen. So what now? Nina's stepping in short term. I'm here for the next 3 days. After that, I expect you to be here weekly. Minimum. Jason nodded slowly. Understood. And if I ever find out another store under your watch is cutting food safety corners to save pennies, you won't have a job, clear? Yes, clear, Jason left quietly. By late afternoon, every surface in the restaurant gleamed. The team had moved with quiet determination, wiping baseboards, vacuuming vents, even replacing cracked floor tiles with spares from the backroom. Miles sat with Nina at a side booth, a printout of the upcoming schedule between them. I can't promise I'll get all this right, she said, glancing at the shift blocks. You're not expected to be perfect, Miles replied, just honest and fair. She looked up. You're staying tomorrow too? I am, right here. Mopping floors again if I need to, she smiled, but not out of amusement, something steadier. It matters, you being here, Miles nodded once. It should have happened sooner. The sun dipped lower as the team wrapped up. No one asked to leave early. For the first time in months, it seemed, they were proud of the space they stood in. And for the first time in a while, so was Miles. By Saturday morning, the staff looked more alert. Not well rested, no one had gotten that kind of reset in just 24 hours, but alert in a different way. Watchful. Curious. Waiting to see if what happened the day before was a one-time shakeup or the start of something real. Miles showed up at 7:30 with his sleeves rolled, carrying 2 jugs of degreaser for the kitchen vents and a box of fresh uniforms he'd pulled overnight from storage. No logos, no branding, just clean, soft cotton in sealed plastic. They'd been boxed for months after a failed rebrand. Now they were being handed out for free. Pick your size before we open, Miles said, placing the box by the lockers. No charge. You wear the company brand, the company takes care of the basics. A few employees exchanged glances. One of the line cooks, a tall man with deep creases around his eyes, thumbed the edge of a folded shirt. Is this permanent? He asked. As long as I'm here, Miles replied. The man nodded once and walked off, shirt under his arm. The new interim manager, Nina, arrived not long after, her hair pulled back tight and a clipboard in hand. She didn't look nervous. She looked focused. She didn't linger in the office. She walked the floor, checked the ice bin, and counted the cash drawer herself. She didn't ask anyone to do something she didn't first understand. Miles was in the walk-in checking inventory gaps when he heard raised voices coming from the front. He stepped out to find a young woman with bright red braids and a delivery badge on her vest standing by the counter, arms crossed. Behind the register, a tall, thin server in his early 20s was speaking with clipped tone and narrowed eyes. I already told you we don't take orders from your app during peak hours, he said. The delivery worker held up her phone. This was placed at 8:40, that's not peak. The server leaned on the counter. Yeah, well, maybe you should tell your company to stop batching orders at the last second and expecting us to jump. Miles approached without a word and stood between them. Everything all right here? The server glanced at him, jaw tight. Just explaining our limits with deliveries. We've had some issues. Miles turned to the delivery driver. What's your name? Renee. Mind showing me the order? She handed over her phone. The ticket was time-stamped and complete, placed well before the cutoff. Miles handed it back. I'll take care of this personally, he said. Thank you for waiting. Renee nodded, still tense, and stepped aside. Miles turned to the server. Let's talk in the office. Now, inside, he shut the door behind them. What's your name? Logan. Miles sat across from him. You've worked here how long? 4 months. You've had training on how we handle third-party orders, Logan shrugged. Trent used to say we can delay if it gets too crazy. Delaying is one thing, being disrespectful is another. She walked in with an attitude. No, Miles said flatly. She walked in expecting professionalism, and you gave her something else. Logan scoffed. It's not that deep. It is now, you're done here, the server blinked. Wait, what? You don't speak to anyone like that. Customers, coworkers, delivery drivers, it doesn't matter. If you can't manage pressure without losing respect for people, you're not a fit here. Logan stood up abruptly. So that's it, Miles nodded. Leave your apron, you'll be paid for the hours you worked. The young man stormed out, muttering something under his breath. Miles waited a full minute before heading back to the floor. He prepared Renee's order himself, double-checked the labels, and handed it off with a quiet thanks for your patience. She left without another word, but her expression had softened. By the time Miles returned to the kitchen, Nina was assigning side stations. She didn't raise her voice, but people listened. She didn't micromanage, but she noticed everything. At 11:30, the door alarm chimed and a man in a white button-down entered, briefcase in hand. Miles recognized him immediately. Devin from HR called in last night just in case any fallout from Trent's removal escalated. Devin was sharp, methodical, and not someone who smiled much. You already had your coffee? Miles asked as they shook hands. I had it in the car, Devin replied. I'd like to observe the staff interactions for a bit. Then I'll need to speak with Nina about any incidents she's aware of. Miles nodded. You'll want to check with the back too. There's been some friction between the kitchen crew and front of house. Nothing serious, but it's worth tracking. By early afternoon, the rhythm of the store had settled into something smoother. No one was rushing, but there was urgency. Clean hands, clean counters, accurate orders. Nina checked in with every table at least once, jotting small notes on napkins and comparing them with the POS times. She didn't delegate that part. Miles worked the floor not as a shadow but as part of the crew. He bussed tables. He poured refills. He even took a tray of food to a birthday party in the side room, balancing it with the ease of someone who'd done it 100 times before. At one point, an older woman in a floral dress stopped him with a smile. You the manager, just helping today. Well, tell whoever's in charge that the young woman with the clipboard is doing a fine job. She checked on my husband's food before I even noticed it was late. I'll make sure she hears that. The woman nodded, satisfied. Mid-afternoon, Miles stepped into the break room and found Nina reviewing the next week's schedule. She looked up, pen still in hand. How's it feeling out there? He asked. Better, still stretched, but people are trying. It's different, he nodded. You're leading it. She hesitated. I had to write up someone an hour ago. One of the line cooks got short with a new runner. I pulled him aside, but he didn't like it. Did it escalate? No, he backed off when I told him he could finish the shift in silence or not at all. Good, Miles said. That's exactly right, she leaned back. I think we need one more support person on weekends, not a server, just someone to float refills, side dishes, cleanup. You thinking full-time, part-time, just peak days, but it'd take a load off. I'll approve the hours. Post the listing by tomorrow. As they stood, Devin entered the room with a small notepad. I've finished my initial rounds, he said. Nothing actionable yet, but I've noted a few areas where the prior manager's behavior went unchecked. A few employees mentioned being reprimanded for reporting issues. Miles's expression didn't change. Names? They asked to stay anonymous for now. I'll follow up privately. Good, document everything. Devin nodded once and left. Nina exhaled. It's going to take time. Miles looked around the room. The walls were still the same dull beige. The vending machine was half empty. The microwave had a cracked handle. Yes, he said. But it's already started. When the last of the lunch crowd cleared, Miles stayed through the close, helping count the till and verify the closing checklist. Nina's handwriting was neat but firm, no skipped lines, no gaps. As he walked out into the parking lot, the sun already dipping low, he paused by a trash bin. A roll basket, half empty, sat on top, clean, untouched. Tossed without hesitation, he didn't smile. He didn't need to. Tomorrow they would open again, and he'd be back. Sunday morning opened quiet, just the hum of prep and the scrape of chairs being aligned. The new rhythm hadn't settled into ease yet, but it had traction. Each person moved with more certainty. Not faster, just cleaner, more direct. Miles arrived early, same as before, with no fanfare. He ran through the cooler checklist, then posted a staff bulletin by the lockers. A printed notice of new food safety procedures, signed and dated. He didn't call a meeting. He didn't need to. People saw it. They read it. And they understood. Things were being written down now. Not whispered, not shrugged off. Documented. Nina came in 15 minutes before open, still wearing yesterday's shoes. She handed off 2 handwritten notes to the opening server's follow-ups from customers who'd left feedback cards. One family had returned after a 6-month absence and complimented the calm pace. Another mentioned a server who helped cut up their son's food without being asked. Nina didn't read them aloud. She just passed them, let the recognition land where it should. In the back, one of the fry cooks, a quiet man named Darrell who rarely spoke unless spoken to, asked if the new gloves were supposed to be single-use only. Miles turned to him. Yes, one task, one pair, always. Darrell nodded and tossed the set he'd been wearing before grabbing a fresh pair. No eye roll, no hesitation. At 10:45, the first real test of the day arrived. A woman in her mid-60s came in with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her blouse, County Health. She hadn't called ahead and wasn't smiling. Miles greeted her at the counter. "Random inspection," she said, flipping the badge open. "We'll need 30 minutes. "Absolutely," he replied, motioning toward the kitchen. She moved fast. Checked temperatures, storage labels, hand-washing logs, even opened trash bins. Miles could see her scribbling something while standing near the back door, then glancing twice at the cooling logs Nina had added yesterday. When she finished, she turned to him. "Your logs are recent. Handwriting doesn't match old ones. They were rewritten. The old ones didn't reflect reality." "We're correcting that." She paused, then nodded. "I've seen worse. I'll be back in 2 weeks." As she left, Nina looked over. "How'd we do? Not perfect, but honest. That's what matters." By midday, the rush began to swell. Miles stepped into a support role again, floating between table resets and drink refill runs. Not out of habit, but necessity. They were still short, and every hand counted. At table 6, he noticed something that stopped him. One of the newer hires, a 17-year-old named Illy, stood stiffly beside a booth with a tray in hand. Across from him sat a man with sunglasses on indoors and a half-eaten sandwich pushed to the side. His voice carried. "I told you no mustard. Are you deaf?" Illy didn't respond, just stood there, still holding the tray. The man leaned forward. "I'm talking to you." Miles stepped in. "I'll handle this." The man turned. "Who are you?" "Owner." The man raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe train your people better." "Illy, go check on table 4, Miles said calmly. "I've got this." Illy stepped away, looking down. Miles turned back to the man. "You're welcome to finish your meal, but we don't tolerate abusive language here, to staff or anyone else." The man scoffed. "That's not abuse, that's expecting competence. You expect respect, you give it, that's the deal here." The man sat back. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Miles said, "I'm asking you to leave." The man stood slowly, muttering as he grabbed his coat. Miles didn't flinch. Once he was gone, Miles walked to the side hall where Illy now stood, pretending to polish a napkin holder. "You all right?" Illy nodded, but his voice was tight. "He does that every time he comes in." Miles paused. "He's been here before, like once a month. Always finds someone to yell at." "You should have told a manager." Illy looked up. "Trent said those kinds of customers were just part of the job." Miles didn't respond immediately. Then, "They're not anymore." Later that afternoon, Miles found Nina by the receipt printer clearing a jam. He leaned against the counter beside her. "How are we on weekend coverage next week?" "Still short too. I've got one applicant coming in Tuesday, but they're green, no service experience." "What's your gut?" She's eager. Asked if she could shadow for an hour before the interview. "Then bring her in, schedule shadowing, paid." Nina looked up. "Seriously?" She asked to learn. "We invest in that." She nodded. "All right, I'll call her." By 4, the pace had slowed. The lull between lunch and dinner crept in, and for the first time all weekend, Miles sat. Not for long, just enough to watch the line crew clean the flat top without being told and the host restock menus without being asked. Small things, but they meant something. He was about to stand when Jason walked in. No tie today, palms empty. He scanned the room, then approached. "I've been here the past 2 hours," Jason said quietly. "Didn't want to interrupt." Miles nodded once, waited. Jason shifted. "You were right. I got too far removed. I didn't ask the right questions, didn't listen." "You're listening now." Jason's eyes didn't move. "Yeah, I am. Good, because I'm not staying here forever. You'll be back in charge of this district soon. And if you let another store slide into that kind of neglect, you won't get a second correction." Jason nodded slowly. "Understood." They stood in silence for a few beats, then Jason added, "Nina's good. She's better than good, and she doesn't need saving. Just support." Jason looked toward the kitchen. "I'll make sure she gets it." As the dinner wave began to build, Miles helped reset the front. He didn't push, just showed up where needed, but something different had taken root. People moved without waiting to be told. They offered help before gaps appeared. At closing, Nina walked the dining room with a checklist, but didn't call out notes or corrections. She just checked them off one by one. Her presence was enough. By the time the last chair was flipped and the lights dimmed, Miles stood by the main door watching the staff trickle out. Illy waved goodbye. Darryl gave a nod, subtle but real. Even the dishwasher, who rarely spoke, patted the doorframe on his way out. Nina approached, pulling her jacket on. "You staying in town next week?" she asked. "No, I'm heading back tomorrow." She studied him. "You trust us to keep it going?" "I do." She paused. "We're still short, still tired." "I know, but it's different now. Feels like we're allowed to care." Miles nodded. "You always were. Now it's expected." He stepped outside, the night cool and quiet. No applause, no grand moment. Just the sound of the lock clicking behind him as the door closed. He walked to his car as the street lamps flickered on, his shoes still damp from the kitchen floor. No cameras, no headlines. Just a man who went undercover, picked up a mop, and remembered what his company was supposed to stand for. And this time, he wasn't going to forget.